And here we are, nearly at the end of the semester, and the time to share our work has come. So here it is, the summary of my semester-long project. So what sort of unit of curriculum did I create? Well, I'm sure you're just dying to know. I developed a brief 8-section curriculum unit to be taught to high school students that are taking a microbiology course. The course is designed to draw on information taught earlier in the microbiology course and help students to make connections to the practical world of food preparation, because each of the students will probably have to prepare and/or store food for themselves and others at some point in their lives. The motivation for this curriculum unit is the sheer number of people who are estimated to contract a foodborne illness each year in the United States, and also abroad, a surprising number of which are isolated cases associated with home-cooked meals. Therefore, people need to learn the principles of food safety to protect themselves from disease and potential death. And what better time to teach them than before they've had much prior training in the exercise. Now I know this is a bit of a busy table, but it does contain a list of each of my learning needs and connects them to their respective levels of Bloom taxonomy. It also shows their relationships to each of the learning assessments that are planned for the curriculum unit. I have identified at least one learning need or outcome that corresponds to each of Bloom's levels of knowledge. The darker colors relate to the cognitive domain, and the pale or pastel colors relate to the affective domain. For this curriculum unit, I have planned one formative and one summative assessment. The formative assessment is an engaging group in-class assignment that is a whole lot of fun. I've participated in this very assessment before in class. Essentially, students are provided a complex foodborne illness outbreak scenario in which they have to work together as detectives to track down the suspected food. Several resources are included in this assessment that are designed to help students to put the pieces together. The purpose of this exercise is to help students to review certain things that they have been taught in the class so far and to develop an idea of how a simple mistake can have grave consequences, emphasizing the affective domain. Now, the summative assessment is a multi-step process or project with various group and individual parts. Basically, the class will create an end of the unit meal to share. As groups of 4 or 5 students, they will identify the food item that they want to prepare, and individually each student will prepare a detailed step-by-step food safety protocol that would be necessary to prepare that specific food item. Then, as a group, they will finalize their food safety protocol and then finally prepare the food to share. The purpose of this assignment or assessment is so that they will get to practice every concept covered in the class in real life and also use a hands-on application. For this curriculum unit, I have selected the 5E model for instruction. I found this model to be sufficiently simple, cyclical, and concise. Because the scope of this class is relatively narrow and the amount of in-depth content that the instructors will need to cover is limited, I decided that the 5E model would be suitable. I also expect that each of the 8 sessions would not be much more than an hour each, so I felt like the 5E model would allow the instructor to move through a few steps with each session. On this slide, I have included the little 5E graphic for reference. Each of the 6 curriculum content parts that I have laid out in this particular unit is labeled here in the flowchart, beginning with foodborne illness, the foods that are implicated, and how to fight them with the 4 fight-back principles of cleaning, separating, cooking, and chilling. Please note how the color scheme of the learning activities for each of the parts of the content are laid out in the flowchart, and they also correspond to one of the colors in the 5E model. For example, the red parts like questions and surveys would correspond to the Engage E. Also note that each of the parts of the curriculum content are green, and they indicate, of course, that there is some sort of teaching involved, and that would be considered explaining. And summative assessments or various end-of-class assessments like the 5-minute paragraph and etc. would be considered evaluation, so they are purple. I'd like to thank you for listening. I'm glad to have shared this classroom environment with you, and I'd also like to thank you for the engaging discussions we had throughout the class. And if you're curious about any of the pictures that I used, since I don't have a works cited page, just note that all of the links are at the bottom of the page.